Hello, all. It is good to be with you today. Thank you to those of you in the Muskegon Rotary for hosting us. My name is Kyle Queers. I am the Associate Director of the Kaufman Interfaith Institute at Grand Valley State University. You know, the Kaufman Institute is a part of a rich history of interfaith dialogue in West Michigan that traces its roots back to Muskegon. In 1989, respected community leader Sylvia Kaufman initiated a Jewish-Christian dialogue as a part of the centennial celebration of the Jewish community's presence in Muskegon. Sylvia's vision and leadership eventually led to the establishment of the Kaufman Institute at Grand Valley State University in 2007. The community outreach established at the beginning in Muskegon continues to be a major focus for the Institute as we have spread out throughout West Michigan in terms of our programming. In promoting interfaith understanding and mutual respect, the Kaufman Institute offers a broad range of programming, over 200 events annually that seek to create a more inclusive and equitable West Michigan community for persons of diverse cultural and religious, secular, and spiritual identities. I'm joined by three of my colleagues at the Institute today to talk with you about some diversity, equity, and inclusion practices around creating more inclusive environments as it pertains to, specifically for this conversation, recognizing, celebrating, and honoring holidays and traditions that surround sacred seasons for folks in your organizations, in your institutions, or in your communities. So I'll begin by introducing our three wonderful panelists today, beginning with Allie. Allison Egrin is originally from Beverly Hills, Michigan, and graduated from GVSU with degrees in dance and marketing with a French minor. She currently works for the Kaufman Interfaith Institute while pursuing a master's in philanthropy and nonprofit leadership. As program assistant at Kaufman, Allison focuses primarily on arts and culture programming, finding ways to integrate interfaith into local arts entities like the Grand Rapids Art Museum and the Grand Rapids Symphony Orchestra, and more. To Zahabia, a transplant from Southern California, Zahabia Ahmadusmani is a Muslim mom of three who lives in Zeeland, Michigan. Diversity, equity, and inclusion work are her passion, which she enjoys as a volunteer for various organizations and professionally at her work at Kaufman as program coordinator for youth programming and initiatives. Zahabia enjoys cooking, spending time with her close friends, and Rummikub in her free time, which is sparse since she's also currently working on a master's in public administration. Lastly, Venerable Isu Kim Hillebrand is a program manager with the Kaufman Interfaith Institute and also an ordained Buddhist Dharma teacher and co-abbot of the Grand Rapids Buddhist Temple. She has earned degrees in biological sciences and cultural anthropology and has more than 20 years of experience in community building, environmental justice work, refugee resettlement, and other types of nonprofit service, including interfaith work. So, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to join me in thanking these panelists for being with us today. I'm just so very grateful for their wisdom, their experience, and the insights that they will share with us. So to begin our time together, I think it's helpful to have a sense of where folks are coming from in terms of traditions. And so I'll begin and I'll start with Allie for this question. So to panelists, what is most significant or meaningful to you personally as a person of your tradition within your tradition?
Hello, everyone. I'm Allie, and I am part of the Jewish community in Grand Rapids. And for me personally, I think the most significant or meaningful aspect of Judaism is the sense of community. Every single step of the way from birth to death is surrounded by community. When you're grieving a lost one, your house is full for a week of your friends and family and loved ones. And I feel like that's really just the essence of Judaism, is this really strong sense of community. And you're never going through anything alone. And regardless of where you are in the world, you can reach out to your local Jewish community and connect with them. And I just absolutely love that, because we're a small community, but you're never alone.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Allie. Kim, we'll go to you next.
Yes, so again, I'm Kim Hillebrand, or Venerable Isu, representing the Buddhist community. What is most meaningful to me about the Buddhist tradition? I think what drew me to Buddhism many years ago was this sense of the importance of striving towards or working towards the realization of interconnectedness, and just loving all beings without condition and without exception. So everyone has a place within the Buddhist tradition, and this level of inclusion within the Sangha or the Buddhist spiritual community offers a really strong sense of belonging for me within this tradition. And then another thing I would say about Buddhism that resonates strongly with me is that it's about training our own minds and hearts through practice, through meditation, and not relying on anyone or anything outside of us to relieve our suffering or to help relieve the suffering of others. So the onus is on us to do the work to be in service to others. So there's this really strong sense of deep responsibility to all living beings that helps me feel connected and part of something much bigger and grander than myself.
Thank you, Isu. It was beautiful. Zahabia, to you, what is most significant or meaningful to you personally within the Muslim tradition?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Muskegon Rotary, for having us here today. For me, Islam at its core is peace, justice, and intentionality. The word Islam is actually derived from the word salam, which means peace. And then, so as you can see, that is core to the tradition. And in Islam, there are two main forms of justice that are core. There's hukuk al-ibad, which is responsibility towards God or Allah, and then hukuk al-insan, which is your responsibility towards your fellow human. And as far as justice goes, the more important in the eyes of God is your responsibility towards mankind. And for me personally, that's just something really important to keep in mind about practicing my tradition, is that idea of taking care of our neighbors, taking care of the people in our community, taking care of the people around us, and having each other's best interest at heart. Finally, intentions. This intentionality is what should drive our every thought and action. Intentionality in our actions is what ultimately will bring us closer to, we believe, God. So those are core to me and my tradition.
Wonderful. Thank you, Zahabia. And thank you again for our panelists for being here with us today. So Zahabia, I'm going to stay with you for our next question. So as a person of your tradition, can you share a little bit about seasons or occasions or holidays that are most important to you?
Okay, great. Yeah. One of the most important holidays that I'd like to share about is the month of Ramadan, which is actually a month in the Islamic calendar, which is a lunar calendar, and it's when Muslims fast from sunrise to sunset. Fasting entails no eating or drinking, but more importantly, it requires abstaining from things like being impatient or angry or judgmental or any other plethora of bad deeds, which is actually the harder part of fasting. The eating and drinking is actually the easier part. It's all the times you like stop and you're like, wait a minute, shouldn't have done that. That's something I need to work on. That reminder, the eating and drinking is actually just that reminder to work on those good deeds. This is a time for us to reset our practice, clear out our thoughts, and work towards doing what is good and right and recentering ourselves into good habits. Generally speaking, this is also a time of great community as we meet with others to break fast at sunset or spend the evenings praying with our families and friends. So it's a time that actually is wonderful in that it brings you closer to God, closer to the people that you love. But I think what people hear when you say you're fasting for 30 days straight from sunrise to sunset is deprivation. And so I hope that you all leave seeing some of the beauty that Ramadan brings us instead of just the pieces that might feel a little different to our ears if we're not accustomed to them. The other thing that you might want to know about the practice of Ramadan is that we wake up really early in the morning to eat before sunrise, and then we don't eat until late. So the days are really long, and sleep deprivation is a real thing during that month, especially since it's a lunar calendar. The month moves around, and if it falls in the summer months, the days are really, really long in Michigan. So if you can do anything in your work environments around more flexible schedules, where if someone skips lunch, that they can maybe go home a little bit earlier and grab a nap before they have to break their fast in the evening, or just any understanding around the fact that something really deep and spiritual is happening in the lives of these Muslim coworkers or community members, neighbors, and an awareness around that. Anything to create space for that is really wonderful. Our two main holidays are at the end of Ramadan. There's Eid al-Adha, which is a celebration that starts at sunset prayers the last day of the fast, and then it goes into for the following 3 days. But people generally take the first day off, and that's when we have prayers and gatherings. And then the other one is about 2 months later, which is Eid al-Fitr, which takes place after the Hajj pilgrimage. And people sometimes fast for a few days during this time as well.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you, Zahabia. And that reminds us well that the November-December stretch is not necessarily the sacred season for everybody of all traditions. I think some of us coming out of a Christian framework like to impose that upon others, and certainly our professional and school schedules support that. But as we continue to hear from folks, just for those listening, just be mindful that these highly sacred seasons can sometimes fall out of the normal, what we consider to be the normal holiday season, again, of November and December. So with that, I'll go over to Aisu. So Aisu, would you mind sharing seasons, occasions, or holidays important to you?
Yes. So there are quite a few different kinds of Buddhism because as Buddhism spread from India and Nepal 2,500 years ago, it was contextualized by the cultures that began to engage with it. So Buddhism in Tibet is somewhat different than Buddhism in Japan or Buddhism here in the US. And the dates fluctuate and the ways of celebration also fluctuate depending on where you are in the world. But across the boards, I would say there are 3 holidays that all Buddhists honor in some way. The Buddha's birthday usually falls in early April and is, of course, a celebration of his birth and his coming to this realm to teach us. The Buddha's parinirvana, or the day of his death, is honored in early February by thinking about or contemplating the many teachings that he left us. And coming up in a few weeks, at the end of December, is the celebration of the Buddha's enlightenment. And I think most Buddhists would say that of these 3, the celebration of the Buddha's enlightenment would be the most important because it's an honoring of the Buddha's most foundational teachings and his way of being in the world that laid the foundation for the faith tradition that Buddhists like me follow today. So, of course, there are specific, when we're able to be in community on these days, there are specific rituals and ceremonies that we celebrate together as a spiritual community. But the Buddhist tradition doesn't require anything specific of us during these times, such as taking time off work. But I usually do, and many other Buddhists do, so that we can spend these days with our community and in meditation and sometimes in seclusion.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kim. Yeah, and as we approach this interfaith work, we're mindful that people orient around religious, secular, spiritual identities in many different ways. So that could be belief, it could be belonging to a community, being with people, identifying with a certain group, and it can be the practices that we undertake, that we invest ourselves in, that are formative to us. So again, even as we're talking largely about marking time, as Kim sort of noted, what happens in those times is also just as important to kind of keep an eye out for folks. So again, we're creating healthy spaces for everyone. Allie, to you, what seasons, occasions, or holidays are important to you?
So similar to my coworkers, December is actually not a holy season for Jews. Um, I think that there's this misunderstanding that Hanukkah is the equivalent of Christmas, and in fact, that is not the case. It is not a holy holiday for us. While in America, it has become a bigger deal because of the commercialization of Christmas. Um, there has now become this like small commercialization of Hanukkah. But however, it's not a time where you would take off work. Some parents don't give their kids 8 presents. So while it's special because it's a time for giving gifts and remembering our past, it's not a holy holiday. Our holy season actually falls in the fall, kind of around the start of a semester or a new school year. And similar to both of my coworkers, our calendar is different from the Gregorian calendar. So our dates shift around a little bit. Not so much where the months move drastically, but something that maybe early September, might be end of September, maybe early October. So it's usually around September or October, and we have Rosh Hashanah, which is the Jewish New Year, and then Yom Kippur, which is our fast. And that is really the most important holidays for Jews. It doesn't matter which denomination, those two are like the core, most holiest holidays. Those are times for reflection, looking back on, what wrongdoings you did in the year before and finding ways to go into that new year better, which I really love because I also think that the fall, nothing new. A child, that's the start of a new grade, maybe a new school. Maybe you're moving around that time. So it's really significant for just your regular life as well. And so for me, I love that organic pause and reset and time for reflection. Another thing to note is that all of our holidays are sundown to sundown. So even if it's the beginning of a holiday day, you might still be at work because it's really the sundown into the next day when you're actually observing the holiday. And then finally, another thing that we observe is every Friday night we have Shabbat, or the Sabbath. And so depending on how observant you are, this may just be a family dinner, or this could be you turn off your phone and you don't use any electricity or electronics from sundown to sundown into Saturday. And so something to be mindful is that maybe your coworkers, it may seem like they're focusing on a work-life balance, but however, they may be choosing to not check their phone, choosing to not check their email because they are observing Shabbat, which again is another natural time to reset. It's a great way to separate the weekday into the weekend. And this happens every single Friday. And for me, I'm not extremely observant, but I do find times to maybe honor a Shabbat a little bit differently. For me, it may just be, doing some self-care that Friday, recovering from a busy week. And then sometimes I do try to use my phone less. So those are, I think, some of the bigger Jewish holidays.
Yeah. Thank you, Allie. I appreciate that. It's a lot to condense in a short time. So again, thank you to everyone here. So the next question is kind of a two-parter, and I'll invite our panelists to opt into either part or whichever part they feel most comfortable with. So thinking about inclusive spaces, what are some examples of implicit bias that you have faced in the workplace in reference to your sacred times or traditions? Or what are some best practices pertaining to holidays for creating inclusive spaces where you feel seen and valued as an employee or a community member? And for this one, I'm going to start with Isu.
Yeah, so I'm going to touch quickly on both of those. At a previous job during a staff meeting, I mentioned that I was going to be honoring a particular Buddhist holiday. And my coworker said that she was shocked that I was Buddhist because I wasn't Asian. So there was an assumption based on my physicality or my way of being that I was Christian and not something else, as an example of implicit bias. And there have been also many times where I've been invited to a work function, which included a meal, but either there was no vegan option, or if we were given an option prior to the meeting, vegan wasn't something that I could choose. And veganism is a very important expression of my tradition as a Buddhist. So I think inclusive spaces in the workplace are created by asking questions and being curious about the people around you and considering with every action you take, especially when you're gathering people together in the workplace, how can everyone feel a sense of belonging, even if you don't know a whole lot about all of the people that you're trying to gather together?
Wonderful. Thank you, Kim. Profoundly helpful. Allie, we'll go to you next.
Mine is less of an implicit bias and more of just a reminder, or maybe something to take note of. Growing up as a child and then in college, I oftentimes did not skip school for Jewish holidays, and that is due to the fact that there are so many. I know I touched on like 2 or 3, but really there are so many. And when you really start to get down into like Orthodox Judaism, conservative, look, there's almost a holiday every single week, and especially with Shabbat, that is true. And so I really found it difficult to take time off constantly for holidays. And in college, it was a very taxing thing to request the days off and to request time off from class. So maybe just to be mindful of what are the protocols for people to take a religious holiday off. And maybe just keep that in mind, that if they are there on a holiday, maybe like think to yourself or maybe find a way to make them feel seen and understanding that they are opting to work during a holiday and vice versa. If they're not there, maybe think about what it took for them to take that time off. And maybe find ways to make it easier for people to take time off, because obviously our natural calendar falls around the Christian holidays, where Christmas, we're always off, Easter, we're always off, but there are definitely more holidays. So just having that awareness of what people go through to get that time off.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Thank you, Allie. Zahabia, round out with you.
Sure. I guess I agree with Ali in that, a lot of times exams even will fall on our holidays or really important events, because it's just, it's not the majority culture. And so just that awareness from teachers or from even just, as a worker, or to know that really important stuff happens when it's super inconvenient and it causes us to miss like some of our most sacred, most holy times is incredibly important. One of the biases that I've faced, similar to Kim, is because I don't wear hijab and I maybe don't appear to be Muslim to people sometimes. So they'll just assume I'm not. And so that's kind of interesting sometimes. And then also people will ask me, how Muslim are you? Trying to gauge, like, obviously the assumption is that there's the extremist Muslims. Are you one of those, or are you like one of the good ones? Which I feel like is another sort of microaggression we need to remove from our sort of being. And then one of the things that I have greatly appreciated is they're living in Zealand. There have been times when we have literally been the only Muslim family in, like, say, a dance program. And my kids, there'll be like a holiday celebration, and the instructors will make a point to have winter-themed plates and not Christmas-themed plates around that party or whatever, and they'll send that out without me saying things. And then I have on the opposite end, my kids' teachers, who I will repeatedly tell that, if you call it a holiday party, it'll feel a lot more inclusive to kids like mine who don't maybe celebrate Christmas, yet they refuse to change that language in their newsletters or anything that they send out. So there's both sides of it that we experience, and not that Christmas is offensive in any way. It just, it's just as you raise your children, and as you, as a community member that does not practice a certain thing, when you can use more inclusive language, why not do that? why not use something that everyone can wrap around and feel feel included in? So those are my tips.
Yeah. Thank you. And I'll just say to our audience, more information and resources on how to cultivate a more inclusive work environment or school environment, whatever it might be around the holiday season as we head into winter, can be found at our website, interfaithunderstanding.org. And I usually say this at the start of our panels, but I think it is a best practice, so I'm going to say it now. We recognize that our panelists don't represent the whole or the entirety of their traditions, but are rather speaking personally out of their traditions as a part of their identity. And so we would encourage you all within your own spheres of influences, organizations, communities, institutions, to seek out individuals and their stories, to find what's meaningful and important to them and how they orient around their religious, secular, or spiritual identities as it pertains to things like holidays or sacred occasions. Because that's, I think, where the real work lies. And certainly, that's consistent with who we are as an institute, and that spirit kind of carries on through all the different community programs, collaborative efforts held in the community to enlighten, inform, and promote inclusivity. Our events try to bring together diverse voices and worldviews to find common ground, foster interfaith cooperation, and elevate individual experience and stories. So again, if you're interested in connecting with us, more information can be found at interfaithunderstanding.org. Thank you so much for having us today. It's been a privilege to be with you. And yeah, we're excited for some Q&A to follow. So take care all. We'll see you soon.